Welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast, the resource for transitional and experienced genealogists who want to create a successful business. I'm your host, Marion Pierre-Louis. Here you'll learn from professionals all around the world who work in the field of genealogy. Are you ready to learn and grow together? Then let's get started. This podcast is sponsored in part by the Association of Professional Genealogists. You can find out more about them at www.apgen.org. Welcome to Episode 10 of the Genealogy Professional Podcast. Today we head over to the state of Virginia to get to know genealogist Michael Strauss. Michael, welcome to the Genealogy Professional Podcast.
Thank you, Marion. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience today.
Let's get started by having you tell us about yourself and give us an overview of your genealogy business.
Well, I'm a native of Pennsylvania. I was born and raised in the area of Hershey, Pennsylvania, where I was born. And I'm the principal owner of the Genealogy Research Network. Primarily, my business services include regular genealogy research, forensic genealogy research, which is the bulk of my business. I also do expert witness testimony in court in several states. I also work and do repatriation work with the United States Army. I delve into genealogy lecturing around the country, both locally, nationally, and regionally. And lastly, I also do private investigation work. And it all really comes together with my being an accredited genealogist for nearly 20 years.
I'm just amazed at how many different things you do, and it's all related, but it's really neat, and I can't wait to talk about your services specifically. But before we do that, I know you've said that you've been doing this for 20 plus years. How did you get inspired to become a genealogy professional?
Well, I actually started doing genealogy research when I was really, really young. I started at the age of 12 in 1977. I joined my first genealogy society, and it was a cost of $2 a year. It was a student rate, obviously. And I had a class in Pennsylvania history in school at the time, in middle school. And I really got bit by the genealogy bug really early on. And this is really what inspired me to get started professionally. Where it actually came about, where I got started itself, was I was offered the opportunity to do a forensic genealogy research case where we had to find heirs to an estate. There were none known to the estate, and it was in Baltimore. And I was working a regular job, like most anybody else, and I was contacted by an attorney who worked closely with my sister-in-law's law firm down in downtown Baltimore, and they needed someone to help them. And this is really what got me started doing genealogy research as a professional individual, because I had never done this before for pay. And I had to make a decision at that point, and I decided to go with my gut instinct and work and do what needed to be done.
The work that you did before you made this big decision, because, I usually ask people what sort of profession or what sort of job they had before they went into genealogy. What kind of work were you doing beforehand?
Now, Marion, you've met me in person. You've seen me in person, so you know what I look like.
Yes.
Would you believe it if I was to tell you I was a truck driver before going into this business? I hauled chemicals, paints, and acids, and I worked for a company in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. And prior to that, I was in the United States Coast Guard, so I'm a veteran of the military. And that's pretty much what I did. On the side, I also did other work related to genealogy, just helping people, of course, mostly. But I got a part-time job at one point just for a few months. I worked for a surveyor in Berks County, and I worked as his rodman, which means I went out in the field and helped him measure the Mets and bounds descriptions on property. And I also did title searching in the courthouse, and that really gave me a nice foundation.
When you were doing the title searching, were you doing that for a law firm, or
No, it was a surveyor.
Oh, for the surveyor. Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right. Oh, how interesting. So you had quite a variety of experiences before you settled quite early on professional genealogy. How interesting.
Yes.
How did you prepare yourself once you decided to make? I'm guessing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you decided to go with this and to take that project, and then during that project, you probably started to think, all right, I'm going to make a job of this. How did you prepare once you made that decision that you realized you had to do certain things in order to turn yourself into a business and get further work past that one project?
Well, this was something that I wrestled with. When I was initially contacted by this law firm in Baltimore and they asked me to help them, I did not know what to do. I didn't even know how much to charge. So I contacted my sister-in-law and her law firm, and I said, well, what do I charge? Because I have no idea how to gauge how much I could make. And I had some leave saved up, some time off, vacation time, and I decided to take 2 full weeks and to delve into this new project that I had. And I did so, and I hardly put a dent into the project. And at that point, my employer, I had to go back to work. So I talked it over with my wife, and we have a large family, and I talked it over with her. And I said, what should we do about this? I just can't start this project and then not finish it. So I decided at that point that I was just going to take a leap of faith, really, and I decided to get into the business full-fledged. I quit my job, and I decided to finish that case. And it took me 6 months to finish it. It was an amazing learning experience for me, and it's really what drove me into the business, full head-on, no turning back.
In retrospect, did you get good advice about what to charge?
Yes, I did. I got good advice from my sister-in-law. She was most helpful, and I am very appreciative of what she did. She was able to really gauge for me in such a way that I didn't overcharge, but I didn't cut myself short either. I think it was a happy medium.
And I would like to mention at this time for our audience that one of the big questions is, what do you charge your clients? And that really is based on experience and things like that. But there also is the difference between charging consumer clients and charging business clients. And I'm not going to go into that discussion here, but when Michael was working for the lawyer, that would be a business-to-business service, as opposed to if a genealogist is doing research perhaps for just an individual who's researching their family history. And there is a differentiation in price because of that. And that would be a good discussion for the APG list, or I don't know, wherever. But I just wanted to toss that out there. So what were some of the things, Michael, that you thought about as you're winding that project down in terms of your education, your genealogy education, and then your business education?
Well, when I was winding down that initial first project, one of the problems I was faced with was, where do I get work from here? And there was a period of several months where I didn't really have much work at all. And I thought to myself, and really had to really seriously rethink this, did I actually make a mistake? Did I decide to do something and it really wasn't in my best interest? And my wife, Diane, who really, really helped me out on this, she's often said to me, and she's come out and said this many times in our marriage. We're married almost 25 years. She said to me, and she literally took out her pom-poms, and she just started to encourage me to go back and to find other work related to that field of work, and I did. I contacted a peer of mine in Trenton, New Jersey, who also does forensic genealogy research, and I just asked her point blank, look, I had this project I just finished. I need help trying to be able to find other clients. Can you give me some advice? And the advice she gave me was to go out and actually talk and communicate with these companies that do this line of work and make yourself available, offer to help them in your area where you feel comfortable. And I did that. And that's what enabled me to get over that initial hurdle where when the work was done on that first project, I was able to get into other work, and then it all just blossomed from there.
I have to ask you, when this person gave you that advice and you went out to talk to these people, you didn't know them, how did you feel? Did you think to yourself, right, Michael, be tough, just do it? Or were you terrified and you forced yourself to do it anyways?
I was totally terrified. Well, I didn't see them in person. I mean, it was all either email or it was through the telephone or through letter. And all the initial contact, regardless of how you communicate with the person, it's nervous, I think. It was nervous for me. But I did it. And I'm glad I did it in hindsight because, surprisingly, several companies that do this line of work, this forensic genealogy research professionally, like myself, they all decided to give me a chance. And it was not just one company, but several who offered me the opportunity to start. And I'm glad I did. It was hard, but I did do it, and I'm glad I did it.
It's wonderful. I'm so happy to hear you describe this. Sometimes starting a business like this just takes guts, and that's the hardest part right there.
Yes, it does.
Is the guts to do it. What were some of the skills and strengths that you brought to your business when you started? I can already infer some just listening to you, but what do you think were some of your strengths and skills, and how have they helped you?
Well, some of my initial skills that I brought to my business, of course, were my own research skills that I had acquired over a period of roughly 15 years from the time that I had started as a young boy till the time that I actually decided to make the plunge into the genealogy field as a business. So those initially were the skill set that I brought into the business, and I had to be dedicated to making this work for me. I didn't tell you when I was driving truck, the last thing that had happened to me, I was injured on the job, and I had to have back surgery when I was 22 years old. And this is almost unheard of to have back surgery at that young age, but I had to. And it affected my life from then on in, certainly driving. I couldn't lift like I used to. I couldn't do some of the things physically that I could do, and I had to make a change. So for me, it was a forced change in some regards. And I decided to take something that I have loved for several years and just make it happen.
What skills do you think you lacked when you started your business, and how did you overcome that?
Oh, wow, I'm glad you asked. One of the skills that I certainly struggled with from the very beginning of my business was something that I experienced also when I went to college. I went to Shepherd University in West Virginia, and one of the things that I really struggled with was writing reports, actually just doing any sort of writing in general. When I initially started doing research for these companies, most of the work I did really wasn't writing based. It was more so document retrieval. I mean, that's really how I got my start in it. And it was presenting the materials, and it was presenting the documentation. And I didn't really have to do much in the writing of like affidavits. That came later. But still, my problem was that when I wrote, I tended to be verbose in my writing, and that was awfully difficult for me to overcome. I still struggle with it in some regards even today. 20-some years later, I still have to work at it, and I have to rewrite sentences over and over so I don't sound verbose.
What was the hardest part about starting your genealogy business?
The hardest part was, for me, finding enough work to support my large family. My wife didn't work really outside the home. She was a homemaker for most of our marriage. She had a couple part-time jobs from the time that we were married forward, but for the most part, no, she was a homemaker. I've talked with you about my family when we talked in person, and I have 7 children, and I have a very large family. And my wife was previously married, and we had 2 children from a prior marriage, and I have 5 myself with her. And in 1995, just a few years into my business, we had 6 of our 7 children by that time, and 4 of which were under the age of 5. So for us, it was finding enough work to support our family so that I could make a go of this and not go back to what I was doing before.
Can you share a story of a specific obstacle or challenge that you encountered at some point during your career and how you worked around it?
Yeah, I have had many obstacles placed in front of me, certainly. One of the obstacles that I had was early when I started my business. I was doing work initially in Pennsylvania. That was the area I would later become accredited in as a genealogist. It was the Mid-Atlantic area, and it included a number of states, obviously. But I initially started in Pennsylvania, where I was based out of. That's where I lived. So it made perfect sense for me to do research where I was most comfortable, the records I was most familiar with. I was asked by one of the companies that I worked with that they came to me and said to me, would you be interested in coming and working with us and doing research work in New York City? And I thought, you've got to be kidding me. You want me to go to New York City for you? I've never been there. I've never done any research there. And what a huge obstacle for me, being that I didn't know any of the records. I wasn't familiar with any of the people there. I didn't know anybody personally in the court system. And for me to overcome this obstacle and how I worked around it was to take on the challenge of a case and actually delve into records I had never used before. I found out and worked and researched records I had never seen and never heard of before. For me, this was the obstacle I had to overcome, and I did it.
Now, did you actually go to New York City for the project, or did you stay in Pennsylvania and work from Pennsylvania?
Oh, no. I went to New York City.
And
I went to New York City many, many times over a period of roughly 10 years. Probably visited, this is in the first 10 years, I probably visited New York no fewer than 300 times. And I'm talking all boroughs. I did research in all the boroughs, including Westchester and Long Island.
that's a big project.
It was, and I had to learn it because it was the only way I could complete the project so that the companies that I worked for could find the rightful heirs. The first and foremost rule in doing forensic genealogy is to do what's called a due diligence search. And that being is that you need to search every feasible possible record there is that's available out there and find the answers to the questions so that the court is satisfied that you had done that work diligently as they had asked. And that's what I did.
Okay, so most of these projects in New York were heir research projects?
They were all heir research
Okay.
projects,
Okay.
every last one of them.
And when you took the project in New York, did the company know that you really didn't have New York experience? Did you say, hey, look, I'm going to do this for you, but this is, I'm going to be figuring this out? Or did you just boldly go forth?
No, I was honest with them, and I indicated to the company that had contacted me first that I did not have the experience in New York. I didn't know the records, but I was willing to try. And it worked out. I think that I believe very firmly that if you work hard at something and you want to try to find it and find the answer, that the answer will be uncovered to you. I believe that. Really, I do. Firmly, I believe that. And it happened. And, I didn't always succeed in everything that I had found. Some stuff I just never found. But I tried, and I at least showed the courts that I did do the effort and made the effort. And the companies were impressed by that. And once one found out that I was doing it, the others started to ask.
Mm-hmm. Great. Tell us about that moment in your business when everything started to come together and you became really confident about where you were heading, and you were confident you were supporting your family, and you were just feeling really good about the direction you were going.
Well, that happened also pretty early on. It happened by 1995. That's really when I felt really confident in my work. I had already been at that time researching in New York and started even in other areas. I started to do work in New Jersey because you have to go through New Jersey from Pennsylvania to get to New York. And a lot of times families that have New York connections, it's not uncommon to have New Jersey connections or even Connecticut connections. And for me, it started to come together, genealogically speaking, because I was able to feel more comfortable doing the work. And really the catalyst for me was my becoming accredited. That's when I felt that everything really came together at a head for me. I felt that now I had the credentials to back me up, and it was at that point forward that I really felt comfortable in this business.
Let's dive into this deeper. First, I'd like you to explain to everyone what accredited means and who accredited you. And also, if you could tell everyone why you decided that you wanted to choose that and why it was important to you. Let's start with that.
All right. An accredited genealogist is someone similar to that of the certified genealogist. They are both obviously different organizations, and they go about their testing procedures differently. But they're both considered, in my opinion, to be considered to be professional genealogists. And it's just a credential that you carry with you as a professional genealogist, whereas if you are in court, you can testify that you are an accredited or certified genealogist, and as such, you would be considered an expert witness in court, and your testimony would be unquestionable. Your testimony would be taken at face value, and no one would question what you had done because you are a professional. You're an expert in your field. For my accreditation, I became accredited in 1995, and I took a long time to do that. I had years, obviously, of experience prior to that, and I decided at that point that was what I needed to do. The reason behind doing it and not being certified is I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. I've been a church member since 1989. I'm a convert to the church. And for me, it really was a no-brainer because I wanted to go that avenue because it was related to the church at that time. The company, or the organization that does it now, is ICAPGEN, which is the International Commission for the Accreditation of Professional Genealogists. That's the organization that the head that runs it now. Well, when I did my accreditation in 1995, I was accredited by the church. The church was the organization, the body that actually tested me, not the ICAPGEN organization that is today. So in that regard, they're very different. They're very different. And for me, I had to go out to Salt Lake City. Now you can take the examinations. My understanding is you can take them here on the East Coast. There is a testing center, I believe, near Washington, D.C., that you can accredit through. It's the application process is similar. You have to pick a region where certification does. I believe certification is more geared towards your interest as a genealogist. You pick a focus, whereas accreditation, it's more a regional accreditation. I accredited in what's called the Mid-Atlantic area, which is New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, and Maryland. That's the Mid-Atlantic region. And I had to be familiar with all of those records. So having gone to New York and these other states, I became intimately familiar with them. The hours that you had to put into it, it's pretty similar from when I did it, and now it's about 1,000 hours, roughly. You have to put down the facilities that you're familiar with, the record types you're familiar with. I had to submit a family group sheet, charts, research logs, all that sort of thing. Then you have to do it now. The only difference is I had to go out to Salt Lake City. I didn't have a testing so much now they do specific times of the year where they test. They actually have time frames where you have to get the application in by a certain time, and then afterwards they schedule you. I just asked to be scheduled, and they scheduled me. And I went in, took the exam, and I had to pass the written exam before I could go to the next step, which was an oral exam. And passing was 90% at the time. And I did pass. I got a 92%. And I'll tell you what, talk about nervous. I went out by myself. I had no one with me. And afterwards, I was so excited that when I passed, I had no one to share it with. I called my family, obviously, but I had no one to share it with. And I remember going to the Brigham Young home, and there's a restaurant right next door, and I actually sat down and had a dinner, and I sat and thought to myself, I really have done it. I've done what I've always wanted to do, and now I can move forward from here.
Well, that's awesome. Did you have to submit a portfolio with that, or is it just a written test?
No, I had to submit a portfolio.
Okay. Wow. And would it take you probably a year? You said 1,000 hours, probably a year to put it all together?
Yeah, it took me a long time to put the hours together because I had to record everything.
Very impressive. Do you have to renew that every so many years? Because I know with the CG, they have to do that.
Yes, AG has to do the same. It's 5 years.
Okay. Wonderful. I really appreciate you taking the time to explain how that all works, because I think people need to know they have the option of both CG and AG, and they need to find whichever one that they feel is best for them. What were the services that you offered when you first got started in your business? We've talked a lot about forensic genealogy. What were some of the other services that you offered, and how have these services changed over the years? Because I know you're offering quite a lot now, and some of them are recent additions. So how have your services changed?
Well, my services have changed in that I've mainly added services that I didn't initially start with. As I had mentioned at the very beginning of the interview, most of my work was forensic-related research. I later started adding the lecturing portion of my research services, and I was able to start to get lecturing situations where I was asked to speak at different conferences nationally and regionally as well. And for me, that was a service I really, really enjoyed. I love meeting people, and I love talking to people, and I like to be able to share what I know about family history research. But at the same time, I look at it as a learning opportunity for me, and I will take anything that anyone has to me. I'm like a sponge. I just love to soak in as much information as I possibly can, because somebody may tell me something that I don't know. Well, not may tell me. I know they'll tell me something that I don't know, and that could help me solve a problem that I may face in the future. So many people have so much experience that just hits the realm. It just blows my mind. And really what I want to do is try to be able to take from others what can help me as well. So for me, the lecturing was a big part of my expansion of my business. A couple years ago, I decided to do the repatriation work. I mentioned that I was a military veteran. I served in the Coast Guard. And as such, I really have a love for the service. And the repatriation work obviously is connecting the Army who've lost connection with the families and to try to find these families for soldiers that are MIA from Korea, World War II, and Vietnam. Most of the cases I've worked now have all been World War II cases, and they have just been so much fun for me. I have learned so much from the experience. And just what I've done is I've helped these families with some closure, I think. And for me, it's really helped out a lot. I have enjoyed that part of my business. And then, of course, the private investigation work. This is all relatively new to me. I'm looking at expanding my business even more from the base that I'm doing now. And most people think of PIs, someone going out and surveillance on someone who is frauding someone or something like that. But PI work and genealogy research work really work hand in hand, in my opinion. And I think that the PI work that I'm doing or starting to do and really delving into now is going to open up new areas of records that I wouldn't have had access to before. Does that help answer your question a little?
Yeah, that's great. And did you have a mentor? How did you get started in the PI work?
I didn't really have a mentor with the PI work. It was just something I decided I wanted to do. I know there are very few genealogists who are professionals out there who are actually professionals, but they are also licensed private investigators in their state. That doesn't seem to be a whole lot of people that fall in that category. And for me, it was just something that I had always wanted to do. Something else I want to do in the future, and I have the application, I just haven't finished it, but I am working on it. I would like to be also certified. For me, it's just as important as the PI license that I have. It's a goal I have upcoming in a couple of years. And so for me, getting education is key in this business.
So you have an AG, you have a PI, and you want to get a CG as well?
Yes, I do.
Wow. You are on fire.
just as long as you don't throw darts at me.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Okay, let me back up just a little bit. So we already know you do the speaking services, and I just might add that Michael is a wonderful speaker. So if you ever get the chance to hear him, definitely take that opportunity. But I want to shift gears and talk about writing, because many genealogists often diversify into writing as well. What have you done in that area? Have you said, well, I'm just too busy, I don't do that? Or do you write articles for magazines, journals, societies, whatever?
Okay, writing, as I had mentioned, I have definitely struggled with writing. Writing is something that's really hard for me. And like I said, I can tend to be a little verbose in my writing. And you don't want to be that way when you try to present yourself professionally. So what I have done in the history of my career, most of it's been just really research related. I've done some writing, wherein I did write a couple of articles locally for some local societies, and I also I did an article several years ago for Ancestry, but I haven't done a lot. What I am working on now is a project that I absolutely love. Most of my family is from Pennsylvania, and they centered around one community in northern Lebanon County where I was raised. And the town name is Fredericksburg. It's just a small community. And there's never really been a good book written on the history of the town. So what I've been working on for more than 20 years is I have acquired more than 500 photographs. I have nearly 300 pages worth of records that I've written. And what I'm planning on doing next year, in the fall of next year, is to have my first book published on the history of this town. So for me, that will be my coming out, so to speak, in my real major writing project. So that's an up and coming for me.
Okay, so even though you have struggled with the writing, you're still sticking with it anyways, and you're pushing yourself forward.
Yes, I am, and I have a website which you'll obviously post online.
I will.
Where I put together for that research on that book, because I feel as though people should know a lot about the town. The town has just been one of those communities that's just been missed, and I don't think it should be missed. There's a lot of people that have gone through there and have traced their roots through there, especially in that area. And for me, it's just something I really want to complete.
Let's mention the address of that website right now, just so that people hear it.
Yeah, sure. It's I kind of abbreviated it a little bit, a little catchy name. It's www.fredpah.com. It's Fred for Fredericksburg, PA for Pennsylvania, H for history.com.
Okay. And I definitely will put that in the show notes for Michael's episode so people will be able to link to that.
I appreciate that.
So what unique services do you offer that makes you different from other genealogists, other than what you've already said, which is so much? I don't know if I really need to ask this question, but I'm tossing it out there anyways.
Well, I appreciate that question. And, something that I do that I think is unique to what I do that I have never seen any other genealogist do, and it relates to the lectures that I give. A lot of my lectures are military-related based lectures, and I really feel strongly that history not only needs to be heard, this may sound strange, but seen, touched, and even smelled. Okay, you're thinking to yourself, how do you smell history? Well, you can. And I have given many lectures on the Civil War and other related military topics. The Mexican War is another one that I enjoy thoroughly. And I'm a reenactor. I'm a Civil War reenactor. And as such, I belong to a regiment here locally, the 99th New York, out of the Tidewater area. And for me, when I give these lectures, I bring the weapons, the equipment, and all the accoutrements that I wear as a reenactor to these lectures. And I let people come up and talk to me about it, see them, touch them. They can open up my cartridge box and smell the gunpowder that was in the cartridge box before I fired the rounds that were in there. So for me, it's the whole package that people get to hear and get to see. For me, that is important. And I have a rifle, an 1863 Springfield rifle. It's a beautiful rifle. It's in mint condition, and it's an original rifle. And afterwards, a lot of these lectures, what I'll do is I'll go outside and I will actually demonstrate how to actually fire the rifle.
Wow, if you're at a conference, do you have to get permission before you do that?
Yeah, I do. People don't like people firing weapons without their knowledge.
Yeah. All right, I have a couple questions about this. If somebody wanted to become a reenactor, is there a national website? So, not everybody listening is going to be near where you live. Is there a national website that they could go to find out what the group might be in their local area?
Yeah, there are reenactor websites where specific units related to specific units, certainly, both north and south. But there is a couple of periodicals that relate to the reenacting field, where reenactors can go to get equipment or even to get information. But someone who's looking to get into the reenacting field, there are national sites that you can go to. Just Camp Chase Gazette is one that comes to my mind. It's a periodical, a publication that is printed for the reenactor, but it's also for someone who's interested in getting into the field.
Okay. And I've heard that when you become a reenactor, you assume the profile of an actual person and then you research that person. Is that true for Civil War reenactors?
Oh, absolutely. I went to Gettysburg this year for the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. It was the week of the battle. It was July of 1863 that the battle took place, historically, and I was there in July of last year. So for me to go to the actual battle on the 150th anniversary, there was nearly 14,000 reenactors between both sides, obviously, and we were far enough away from the spectators that I truly did not see the spectators. What I saw was what my ancestor would have experienced on the field. It was like I lost all time and place, and I felt myself literally thrust into that time period, and what I saw was what would have been seen on the field. Everything was there, all the confusion, the smells, everything, the noise. You couldn't even hear orders being barked out by your commanders as our lines literally pushed into each other. It was total chaos at times, but that was normal. The officers who put this together, they're the ones that choreograph it. I'm a private. I don't know anything that's not told to me, and it just all kind of happens. And I assumed the persona of one individual from our regiment. And what happened to that individual when that person was at the battle happened to me. And at some point in the battle, I was killed. I was shot right in the head, and that's what happened.
That's a lot of reality. I've never seen a Civil War battle reenacted, but they did actually have an encampment in my town locally this year, which is where they come and they camp for the weekend, and they live as if they were camped on the battlefield or wherever. And I brought my son to that. It was really fun to be able to
There's
go up
nothing
and
like it.
and
There's
yeah,
nothing like it.
to be able to see everything firsthand and talk to the people, and it was a lot of fun. What has been the most challenging aspect of being a genealogy professional from a business point of view, if you look across all the years that you've been doing this?
Well, for me, it's been keeping on top of the invoicing related to my business work. I am an historian, and I am certainly not a mathematician. So for me, even in school, I couldn't even stand math and science. For me, I have never enjoyed that, and that's something I have always had to struggle with, and it's been challenging for me, and that's where I get my wife to help me. She helps me with the business portion where I actually have to get help related to that because I'm just not good with that.
So she can actually do that for you?
Oh, she can definitely do it for me.
Oh, that's awesome. How do you balance paid work and volunteering?
Well, this is something I certainly struggle with as well. I do really like to help as many people as I can, and it's never really been about the money for me. I do currently serve a volunteer basis a couple of places. I'm president of our local genealogy society here in Virginia Beach. It's the Virginia Beach Genealogy Society. I am serving, I will be this Thursday is our meeting, actually, and I was just reelected as president for another 2 years. Additionally, I also serve as our program chairman as well, so I get all our speakers every year. And I always insert myself every year, and I never pay myself, so it's something I do as a volunteer. I also volunteer in our local family history library here in Virginia Beach. Being a church member, I feel very strongly that I should be helping the members of our church, but I should also be helping the public as well. The public has just as much of an interest in this as obviously church members do in my thoughts. So for me, the medium, it's finding the happy medium. It's finding where I cut off when I'm volunteering as opposed to where I would need to be paid. And for me, I found the best way to do this was to limit the days that I do those volunteer type pieces of work. For an example, for me on the Family History Library, I volunteer the second and fourth Saturdays of every month. So this Saturday, I would have library duty from 9 to 12 in my local family history library, and I am open for whatever anybody wants me to help them with. It's no holds bars. I'll help them with any project they want. I'll do anything that they ask me to do. I'm even willing to go a little extra for them and look something up at home if need be. But beyond that, I try to limit it to paid related work.
What is the most fun project that you've ever worked on that you can share with us?
Well, I've certainly had a lot of fun projects over the years. I've had one both that was personal, and I've had several that were business related. On a personal project, this happened after I got married, just after I got married, and I really was just getting started into my business at this time. My father-in-law approached me and said he had found some family names in his genealogy. He was also interested in family history. My wife, not so much, but him and his wife, my mother-in-law, they have been interested in family history. And he said to me, I got Strausses in my line, which, of course, is my last name. And I thought, really? I said, I'd like to know more about those. So he gave me the work, and he gave me what he had, and I started to look into it. And I found out that he not only had a Strauss in his line, he was a direct descendant, thereby my wife was obviously, a direct descendant of my direct ancestor, John Samuel Strauss. So my wife and I share a common ancestor, but not just any common ancestor, a Strauss common ancestor. And when he heard about that, he said to me, joking, at least I hope it was a joke, he said to me, we're going to have to recall your marriage, like we were some really close related cousins, although in reality we were like fourth cousins, so it wasn't that close. And it related to one of my forensic cases in New York, a case I testified on years ago. I had a particularly enjoyable case where I researched this family, and this family had some amazing, unique names that I just never had experienced before in any of my family-related research. And one of these individuals, I won't tell you the last name of the person, but the first name was so unique I never forgot it. And this man's first name was Smiley, Smiley. And I thought that was an amazing name. And when I contacted him, he had no knowledge of the decedent, didn't know really anything about his family, and he was so excited to talk to me about his family history because he knew so little about it and wanted to know more about it. And I can only imagine that he indeed, as his name implied, I believe he smiled a lot, and I know I did. And I got to know him because I had to call him several times to get more details. And every time I called him, it was just more enjoyable. It was just a fun time for me.
Sometimes the people you work with, really make the project. Let's take a quick break to hear a message from the Association of Professional Genealogists.
Hello. This is Kimberly Powell, President-elect of the Association of Professional Genealogists. APG is an international membership organization dedicated to supporting all individuals in the business of genealogy, whether you're an archivist, librarian, educator, writer, or researcher. Our 2,600 members include genealogists at all stages of their professional careers, from those just starting out to some of the field's most renowned leaders. Learn how to grow your business and network with other professionals through our educational webinars, informal mentoring groups, active discussion lists, the APG Quarterly, and our annual Professional Management Conference. Visit us online at apgen.org to learn how we can help you on your professional journey and how you can help us advance public awareness and understanding of the profession of genealogy.
All right, Michael, we are about to enter the lightning round. This is where I am going to bombard you with a bunch of questions, and you are going to come back with brilliant answers that are going to help all the genealogists that are listening. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Okay. What was the one thing you were most afraid of in starting your business?
Well, whether I was even good enough to succeed in that business and to really call myself a professional. That was the one thing I was most afraid of.
What is the best advice or encouragement you've ever received?
Well, for me, it was encouragement that I received. A professional genealogy speaker friend of mine and a mentor of mine very early in my career at a conference I attended in Salt Lake City. I also spoke there as well. I was invited to give a lecture, and he said to me, and I'm just quoting, and he wrote this down, and he said to me, "It's such a good feeling to know that quality research will be carried on by someone like myself." He said, "Genealogy is in good hands." And for me, I never forgot those words, and I've always tried to live by those standards.
That's nice. What is one specific action listeners can take in the next 24 hours to help them transition into a genealogy career?
Well, I think for listeners to look at different records that you've never thought about or you have never been exposed to using before. As a professional genealogist, you'll need to be familiar with as many unique record groups as possible. One example I have here is size rolls that are part of what's called the United States Marine Corps records. These are similar to muster rolls, but I had never heard that term before. They detailed in depth information about the enlistees, but they're not called muster rolls. They go by a totally different name. And for me, this was getting familiar with a record that I totally had no familiarity with, and it was an important aspect of my business to learn.
Do you have a productivity tool like a Dropbox or Evernote that you love that you can share with us?
I do use a couple productivity tools. I believe very firmly in Dropbox and also in Google Drive. I like both of them. They're obviously very similar. Both have helped me in my ability to be able to share files, documents, and other materials with persons who are across the country where I would need something in a hurry. And I've asked someone, and I have friends in Salt Lake City who work at the library, and I'll ask them to copy documents that I can't get readily right then and there on the spot without traveling. So I'll have them done and put on Dropbox or Google Drive. So I love it.
What is your preferred social media channel, or don't you use social media?
I do use social media. I have a link to my website for LinkedIn. I really feel strongly that networking and networking tools is really where being a professional genealogist, it really comes to light. It's really important for a professional genealogist to get with his peers or his or her peers and to really use that as a target for them to build their business.
So LinkedIn would be your first choice for social media?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I have a Facebook account, but that's really personal, and I don't really use it a lot.
Mm-hmm. If you can recommend one book for our listeners, what would it be?
Well, one book that's really been helpful to me has been the really large, very thick book. It's the one on professional genealogy. It's the one written by authored by Elizabeth Shown Mills. That book has been so much help to me. It has so many chapters, varied on so many topics, everything from lecturing to writing client reports to just starting in business to even doing accounting-related stuff. It's really an amazing book.
And I'm going to throw an extra one at you here. If you could recommend one book for somebody who's interested in learning about military records for the first time, what would you recommend that they look at to get started?
Well, there are certainly a lot of books on the military subjects. That's without a shadow of a doubt. One of the earliest books I've ever written that I found is really just timeless, and nothing really has – I mean, there's been a lot of books written about it, obviously, but it's called Tracing Your Civil War Ancestors, and it's by Bertram Groene, Groene. And it's a book that I have. It was one of the very first books I ever bought, and it's been reprinted half a dozen times. And I love the book, and I still use it, and still the information is very timeless.
Okay, now I'm going to hit you with a hypothetical scenario.
Okay.
You have to move across country. Now you're moving to California, okay? You cannot take your PI license with you, nor can you take that AG regional specialization. You are being relocated permanently to California. You don't know anybody, and you're not familiar with the record groups in that location. What are you going to do in your first month to hit the ground running and start a new genealogy business?
I'm not going to move. No. No, I guess I shouldn't do that. No, I gotta help you on this one. Well, for me, I think I would contact first the local library and try to contact societies in the area. Not every area has a local genealogy society, but most areas, I think, have some sort of historical society. I mean, they're related. And I really believe heavily that networking within those organizations is really the best way to get a firm footing in your new community. Now, my business, as you probably have already established, is very portable. I can live really almost anywhere and conduct my business as normal. When travel is required for my business, like in my forensic work or in testifying in court, which I do in 4 states, I just simply need to go to that location. If I need work from somewhere else, I'll ask. That's really how I think would be best for me to get started in a new area.
And would you go forward and get licensed in those would you get the PI license as soon as you could?
Yes, I would. In Virginia, there are reciprocal states, and California is not one of them. So I would have to probably I would have to go through the process of getting the PI license in the state of California. Mm-hmm. And as far as the accreditation is concerned, you could accredit in that area just as readily as you could for the Mid-Atlantic area. You obviously have to be very familiar with the records.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wonderful. Give our audience one piece of parting advice, and then tell us how we can get in contact with you.
All right. Well, one piece of advice I would give to the listeners, genealogy is full of serendipitous moments. Let your ancestors find you, because they will. And the best way that I can be reached is through my website, I think, www.genealogyresearchnetwork.com, all one word. My contact email, mlstrauss@genealogyresearchnetwork.com, is on there, and my phone number is also on there, and I welcome calls or text messages without any issue.
Michael, thank you so much for stopping by the Genealogy Professional Podcast. It's been wonderful having you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I appreciate that.
So in this interview with Michael Strauss, we have talked about so many things. We've talked about forensic genealogy. We've talked about military repatriation cases. We've talked about Civil War reenactment. We've talked about being a private investigator as an option as one of your services in a genealogy business. And we've also talked about accreditation. And in this particular case, we talked about becoming an AG. Many, many diverse and varied services that Michael offers that really showcase just how far you can take your genealogy business. As your action item for this week, what I would like you to do is to think about the services that you offer right now and think about whether you can expand those services. But specifically, I want you to think about, can you expand your services by getting further education? Will becoming accredited, either with a CG or an AG, open up new avenues for you as an expert witness, or in military repatriation cases, or in forensic genealogy? Or is getting licensed as a private investigator the direction that you want to go? So I would like you to think about further education, not specifically strictly genealogy education, but the other areas as well, private investigator or some of the other peripheral things that contribute to the field of genealogy. And think about, are those options for you? Would that expand your business? Would you enjoy that? Would you like to make that a part of your business? And if so, is it a realistic thing that you can work towards in a time frame of your choosing, whether that's 1 year or 5 years or maybe even 10 years down the road? I think the key in growing our business is to think about things first and then plan how you're going to accomplish that. Now, planning doesn't mean that you have to get it done in the next 6 months. You can say, well, I really want to achieve this. I can't do it right now because I have small kids or whatever. But you can say, well, I'm going to make that a goal in 5 years, or I'm going to make that a goal in 10 years. Now, I've got some kids at home that are young. They're not in diapers anymore, thank goodness. But I do my planning based on that. And I know there's some things I'm going to have to wait to do until they're older. So think about these options. Certification. Maybe now's the time to explore, what does it mean to get an AG? What's involved in getting the AG? You learned a lot about that process from Michael. What's involved in getting the CG? And can you realistically fit that into your life? And what does it take to get a private investigator's license? Do you need one for your state? So now's the time, and this is your action item for this week. Explore those things. Broaden your knowledge, make yourself aware, and start thinking about whether that's something that you want to incorporate into your business. Until next week, so long.